Let's dive into this topic around how you guys did it. I mean, how did you guys go from 300,000 in LinkedIn spend a month to 15,000 and actually accelerating and increasing pipeline over time?
And so what we did is we actually cut it down in an experiment. I cut it down on a 2 week period down to a really, really low amount.
All right, guys, really excited about this episode. Today we have on here Paul Ross, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Affinity, the relationship intelligence CRM that has grown rapidly over the years, finding its niche, serving the VC and PE community, and then expanding into other verticals from there. Paul has held VP of marketing positions for over a decade now at companies large and small. And today we'll be talking about the problem that many of us are facing, which is that traditional channels just aren't working as well right now. Here's the story of how Affinity went from $300,000 to $15,000 a month in LinkedIn spend by building a content machine that has driven pipeline even higher. Paul, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So let's dive into a quick background about your story and we'll get into the topics.
Cool. Yeah. So as you said, I'm the CMO at Affinity. I have been on a kind of a journey in tech marketing for quite a while now. Actually, this is my 25th year in marketing, which is kind of dramatic because some of my customers and some of my team weren't born when I started doing this. But I've kind of come from a product marketing background, so I've always been really focused on getting the right message, getting the right channel, working deeply with sales, and that's kind of led me through this journey through running product marketing teams at companies like Ultrix. Spent some time at Microsoft, being a cog in a very big machine, and then kind of building out my kind of demand gen and content shops in the meantime. So it's been a really interesting period. And the great thing, even though I've been doing this 25 years, is I still get to learn a lot. And some of those things we'll be talking about today.
That's amazing. No, I feel like learning never stops, especially in marketing, because the market is changing. Strategies have sometimes short shelf life. And so we always need to stay attuned to what's going on in the market. Let's dive into this topic around how you guys did it. I mean, how did you guys go from 300,000 in LinkedIn spend a month to 15,000 and actually accelerating and increasing pipeline over time?
Well, I think this is really interesting because this is a little bit of an older story, but the key to this to me is over the last, as you said, last 12 months or so, it's been really hard for marketing to maintain its, the pipeline that we're creating, primarily because of the fact that some of those channels that we've been relying upon for years haven't been delivering in the same way. Like website traffic's way down, digital advertising return is all over the place in terms of performance. I know there's plenty of people who do well there, but I think like our sales colleagues, the last 18 months have been a bit of a shock to our systems. But for us, what we were able to do is we were able to kind of like absorb that shock that we felt, everyone felt over the last 18 months, because we built up this content machine that's primarily focused on what are the problems our customers face. And I think that there's an issue in marketing overall, which is that we became really reliant upon scaled performance marketing and kind of left behind the message, the story, how customers actually need to solve their problems. When I got to Affinity, just to get to the story specifically, we were spending about $300,000 a month on LinkedIn advertising, and I think that's like an extreme number, but it reflects a lot of what people have had to deal with. It's like, how do you scale? How do you keep up with what was happening in the tech market? And LinkedIn, AdWords, all of those things were everybody's shortest path to scale and everybody's shortest path to understand what worked and what didn't work. And so it didn't surprise me necessarily that was the case, but a bit extreme in terms of the dollar amount. But once we'd finally kind of connected top of funnel to bottom of funnel and understood what was actually driving things, and I kind of worked my way through the internal, like, wow, but it's brand and halo, and like we get all of these things from it. The reality was that we were spending $300,000 on something that wasn't delivering, like fairly straightforward. And so what we did is we actually cut it down in an experiment. I cut it down on a 2 week period down to a really, really low amount. The guy who's currently my director of demand gen, Faison, was so up for making changes and experimenting. And what was interesting to us was our pipeline stayed steady, because we finally understood where our value was coming from and where the kind of pipeline was really coming from by kind of tying together those things. And that's very obvious. You want to tie your top of funnel to your bottom of funnel. But by questioning the assumptions, what we were doing, we were able to really make a difference in terms of what we were doing. The good news is that what we did is we took that money and we started to invest in other areas. So we added a deeper content understanding. And my CRO, Dustin, has this phenomenal way of thinking about the world, which is, early in your funnel, early in your time talking to a customer, whether they're, in the awareness stage, consideration, whatever, you're really at that point, you're selling the problem that they need to solve. And by us switching to this much more, how do we solve your problem and how do we have a narrative around that over time? That's how we got to kind of build up our pipeline. And it was really good job that we did because last year everybody's budgets got cut. We delivered $1 million more pipeline last year than we did the year before on a 25% less budget because we'd invested in this machine to really understand customer problems, customers, the jobs that they need to do on a daily basis, and tying our value to that over time. So it's a really interesting learning in terms of not taking what's assumed to be working and assumed to be effort, and investing in really just how do you help solve a customer's problem.
The fact that you took away all that LinkedIn spent and then pipeline remained the same kind of tells you the actual contribution of some of these paid channels.
I know, absolutely, absolutely. And again, we're a vertical SaaS vendor, so we have a very specific market. As you said, we sell into venture capital and private equity, and a couple of other areas like incubators and other kind of private capital investing. So it's an interesting audience compared with many people. But for us, really just understanding what was driving our deals was much more important. Like the very cliched, but I think one of the most accurate and useful things is the taking stuff on your form and saying, "How did you hear about us?" Like that was the killer thing for a lot of people in the last year or so, was stopping relying upon attribution. I have a very strong set of opinions around attribution, which kills my marketing ops person. But the decision to think about attribution differently and not in the very technical dollar attribution to a specific ad or those sorts of things just freed us up to really invest in the way that we did.
Do you have a quick summary on your take on attribution? I think that's something that people would really, or is this going to be a longer,
No. Very
yeah.
really, really. I have a mug. I don't know if you've seen this, which is it says marketing attribution. We totally made it up, and I don't think that's fully fair. But I think trying to get into causal models of attributing $200,000 of the pipeline to one thing based on a model versus where did it actually come from is really big. So I think multi-touch attribution, sophisticated attribution models. I think in most organizations they're not actually that useful. I think if you are truly performance marketing and your digital is driving things at an incredible rate, I think those are it's really important to understand that customer journey. For us, not so much because this is all about how do we help those customers solve their problems and see that. And so they might have 15 touches. I don't care which one was worth 30%. It's about like us building the machine and building that kind of base of content that drives people there. It's telling stories. That's really what it comes down to.
I love it. You simplified it a lot.
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
key metric that you're looking at then? What have you simplified it down to?
To be honest, we look at pipeline is the only thing that we really think about. And the way that we attribute that is that we have kind of two sources that are marketing relevant. One is hand raisers. Big chunk of our business comes through people filling out a request a demo, request a trial type form because we've driven them through all of this other content and all these other stories to our website to engage with us directly. And the other one is we have our MQA, so marketing qualified account, where we're looking at people who are in market, have a level of intent, have had some level of engagement with us, haven't raised their hand, and we use that really as our outbound model from a sales perspective of kind of warm outbound is where we drive the thing. So I'm paid on pipeline, qualified pipeline, and so therefore that's what I'm measuring down from rather than up to. It makes a big difference in terms of how we think about it.
I'm sure the most qualified pipeline is the one that raises their hand and is
Yeah,
qualified.
exactly.
That's the best
Yeah,
time. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
easily, easily. Can we go back to exactly how you did that? So you cut paid budget,
Mm-hmm.
and then pipeline didn't move, and then talk to
Mm-hmm.
me a little bit more about how you orchestrated the pieces, the people, the processes to get to the new content engine.
Our starting point was again. This is not particularly innovative, but it was about really understanding our customers and our ICP and who was really buying. There was a lot of assumptions in our organizations around who was really driving deals and where they were coming from. And so putting effort into, okay, let's really understand our ICP. And again, something that I credit my CRO, Dustin Deno, with of really understanding the jobs to be done. And so really tying what our product was doing to what the jobs were that our ICP, once we clarified it and we were clear on who the buyers were and who the influencers were, tying that into there. So that was the kind of like starting point of like let's do it, and then building out a content team who were and a product marketing team who knew our audience in depth. That was the key thing. Is that I
Yep.
think a lot of it's been quite surface up till now.
Could we talk about how you figure that out specifically? The jobs to be done, the problems that like how did you hone in on the messaging?
Well, so first is it goes back to how deep we are with our customers. I in my career, I've done my leadership career. I've done something that has at times been really painful, but I've always invested in customer marketing early. So having somebody who is really dedicated to talking to customers alongside product marketing, sourcing customers who want to be involved in what we do, people who have great stories to tell, really starting there. So how do we go and talk to those customers in depth and spending a lot of time with them? That plus, doing some really rigorous research over time. Like the last year or so, we've been using the crap out of AI to go research the jobs to be done within VC firms and how that's changing.
Okay, how did you do that exactly? Using
Oh,
AI?
just
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of chat GPT,
Yep.
and really, really tying in and building that over time. That's probably the biggest use of AI that I think we've had in the marketing and sales teams was building that out. So then marrying that with product marketing, like my product marketing team is about talking to customers, not talking to internally. And so getting them really deep on it and having those guys be experts on that is really what we're doing. So all three of those combined really gets to this like, okay, what jobs to be done? So as you know, like deal sourcing is such a huge deal in our space. I've been running campaigns on deal sourcing, not on CRM, but sourcing deals and managing deals through pipeline for the last 24 months. Highest returning campaigns consistently, because that's what our audience cares most about. The VC audience, the investor audience, cares about deal flow. How many great deals do I have in my pipeline that I'm potentially going to be able to invest in that will give me a return down the line? And so deal sourcing is number one. And then we talk about, portfolio management. How do you use your CRM to manage and understand what's happening within your portfolio? How do you then go raise funds as a VC from LPs? Because all of this is driven around the same set of relationship information that's embedded in our platform, as well as the transactional information in terms of the relationship. When was the last time you talked to somebody? When did you have a meeting with them? Who has the best relationship? So all of those things we're tying together into those jobs to be done and producing content and hosting roundtables to help our audience share their experiences. That's really where we made it successful over that period.
Okay, awesome. So now that you have the messaging, now you have the problems, and you understand your customers better, can you tell me? Imagine I'm Ray. I'm the CEO of Affinity for a second here. How do you pitch this? What's the budget allocation, and how do we make this all happen? What's the timeline?
Well, it's a really interesting position to be in terms of credibility when you've been able to cut a spend virtually to zero and still maintain your pipeline. So you bring in some credibility with attached to those things. And again, I credit my director of demand gen Faison for pulling together a lot of that kind of analysis and perspective. But really, what we did is we talked to him about the core of our company is about relationships. And so tying our brand to that and tying our marketing model to that was really an easier pitch than I thought it might be, because we're able to talk about, so we know this customer, we know how much they're looking for insights. We're looking for, we built up all the ICP stuff. And then we're saying, if we get these people in a room together, they're going to get high ROI and we're going to get high ROI of it. So we do some test activities. We did our first customer conference, which was wildly expensive, but wildly successful in terms of setting us up for the future. So it was really a series of like, let's show how this model can actually deliver value, and then taking that and turning that into specific investments. So, okay, we want to build along this line of deal sourcing and portfolio management. So we need some content for that. So them doing it. So it was a very logical approach, and Ray, he's a very logical guy. He and Shuby, who are our co-CEOs, both very logical guys. Stanford grads or Stanford attendees with one of them dropped out, because that's how you have to have at least one of them drop out to make a company. But you really just having that model of like building trust over time and then saying, here's where I'm going to go invest. And obviously that's changed, like everybody's budgets changed over the last 24 months. We made adjustments, but the core is really in place where I have built out the content machine, I've got the product marketing, and then I have the demand gen guys building the channels and using that content. The other key thing, I think the other investment I made on top of customer was actually bringing some of the services in-house that have traditionally been external in companies. So I have a designer on my team, which not many CMOs have at this stage. I have a team of designers so that we can take and own the design and the quality of what we're doing. Because again, we know our ICP. We know how, these are investors. These are people who spend money. These are people who have a certain level of expectation of experience, and so we're maintaining that and delivering on that. So yeah, it was an interesting set of conversations, but definitely helped with maintaining our pipeline and growing it already, and then coming back in with like, and this is how we're gonna kind of do that. And last year it was like, and here's how we're gonna weather 2023. Made it a much easier conversation.
No, it's beautiful. I always equate building brand and presence and getting the story down right. It's like building the Taj Mahal, the Burj Khalifa, the Sagrada Familia. Sometimes it never finishes, but you start to build from the basement and you start to see the palette. You see it in your mind, the vision over time, and it
Yeah.
takes time to explain it. It doesn't
Well,
happen all at once, but
I think that's really true, and I think from a brand, it's like it's never stopped. And like I have this thing about category creation as well. I think the way that you create a category is you sell stuff, and then you build that story about how these customers are using it, and then that starts to build what you would call a category. You don't go. I don't think setting out to create a category makes a lot of sense. You do that through selling stuff and then telling the customer story, and that never finishes. That's never done.
oh, well said. Can we talk a little bit more about this content, operational content creation piece? Like, how many pieces of content? What were the distribution channels? Like, maybe from top to bottom, how did you even conceive of these ideas and make it synthesize and all make sense for your customers?
Yeah, I think going back to the understanding of the ICP and the jobs to be done is the starting point for all of this. Obviously, we're paying attention to what's happening in the market. We do regular surveys of our own. We just did one for about 300 investors. What's your top thing you're focused on this year? And it's deal sourcing again. Like last year, it was deal sourcing and portfolio management because everyone was freaking out about what was going on in their portfolios. This year, it's clearly about fundraising.
Thank God, finally, we're back.
Well, well, I think they're going. The other thing that they said that they were back with was actually last year. The data showed they were pessimistic about 2023.
Oh, good.
This year said they were optimistic about 2024. So that was the starting point of something that was interesting in terms of that. But what the reality is, the reason it was fundraising wasn't for us as startups. It wasn't fundraising for startups. It was fundraising for VCs because it's been hard to do that. And so it's interesting because if you think about jobs to be done in a VC, you got finding companies, investing in them, making them successful, and raising more funds. And that last one eclipsed the middle one in 2024. So we're focused on those types of trends. Like where are we seeing these kind of trends pop up? Is really what we're doing. But they're tied to those jobs to be done. So we're not like diverting off onto random acts of marketing. We're doing like, okay, this is something that's part of our jobs to be done, fits within what our sellers are selling to, fits within what our product team are developing to, and then we're just driving that as a kind of a content space, if you like. So we're just in the process of doing a roundtable that's focused on fundraising for, how do you use your CRM and relationships to drive fundraising from LPs and managing them. So it just all kind of ties together with that background. That's really what we're talking about. And then, to be honest with you, we're always experimenting with the right type of content. You mentioned like pieces and all those things. Again, one of the great things about having a design team in house who also have web skills is that we are trying out new ways of delivering content that's not a PDF behind a form, which is obviously everybody's traditional model. So we have some new form factors that we're trying out, digital online white papers that are not boring to read for a starting point, and look great and are engaging, going back to the persona that we're talking about. But we're kind of trying a lot of different things. It's interesting. We find that tying a report alongside a guide plus a lot of customer content with a dinner works for us. So we're really just trying to make this all like a coordinated effort that isn't just one channel or another that we're doing.
Oh, that's amazing. And I really liked your point about following trends. And we've seen this at Warmly ourselves. Like we'll write content pieces on our category, but all that story has already been said by somebody else.
Yeah,
And you'll
yeah,
see like an echo chamber. But when there's a new trend that pops up, everyone wants to know what to do next.
yeah.
And if you can establish yourself as like the first person to provide actually insightful analysis on this trend, then you can
Correct.
bring yourself up as an authority figure in the space.
And it's so hard. It's so hard to do because you're right. Your natural inclination is to build those category and brand pieces. Like, let me explain why we're great, basically, which is fine. Like that stuff's useful. But yeah, like when we're trying to make sure that everything that we say is actually informative rather than just shouting at people, which I think a lot of us tend to do. Is you know buy our stuff because it's great type content, but that's unfair. But like you get what I mean in terms of like trying every single piece being informative and credible makes a huge difference.
Totally, 100%. I mean, it'll come naturally once you I think a lot of marketers are starting to realize that if you establish yourself as the authority figure, then over time, that person becomes in market, they're not going to be thinking about XYZ tools. They're going to be thinking about your brand. And it's
Correct.
not going to be intent-based keyword search. It'll be branded-based keyword search. They'll search for Affinity
Agreed.
because they know that Affinity, relationship intelligence, they talk about they're the best, they're number one. I've never used them
Yeah.
before. And then on top of that, you layer in customer testimonials.
I agree, and to your point earlier, like we're lucky that we've been around 4 or 5 years now. We built a brand. We have rabidly excited customers. I've never come across a group of customers actually who are so keen. We have our challenges like everybody, but it's a really interesting perspective. But you don't get to skip to there straight away. You do have to put the hard work in to get to that stage. And I think it's actually harder now that some of these digital channels are not working as well, partly because there are tens of thousands of SaaS products, all in the same channels, all looking to talk about the same things in a lot of cases. So how do you break through that? And I think that's a challenge. We see that on our new business where we're selling Affinity for Salesforce into the enterprise Salesforce audience, where we're taking a lot of that relationship intelligence. So there's a lot of CRMs and there's a lot of people on the App Exchange. So how do you kind of cut through that? And again, I think it's about finding those problems that you actually solve for, and talking to how those customers can get there. Like we launched Affinity for Salesforce in April of last year. Our biggest lead flow week and opportunity creation week came from one blog on one community called Salesforce Ben about solving a specific problems faced by enterprise SaaS Salesforce users that's coming up in 2024. So it's I think it's harder than ever to kind of break through if you're early in your kind of journey to build your brand. Um, but again, for me, it comes back to like how do you solve those key customer problems?
How do you research the content for the blog articles? I mean, there's a lot of content marketing
Mm.
that's optimized for SEO, but like to produce
Yeah.
really high quality content, it takes time. So, do you have a strategy behind that?
So we do use a mix of kind of SEO driven models for that. There's a guy John Henry who we've used his agency a number of times, Growth Plays, for the kind of like if you think about moving into a new area like Affinity for Salesforce, where we're talking to a new audience that doesn't know us. So building that kind of baseline, keyword driven, SEO driven kind of things, but fighting to find the places where you can have the most relevance. I find a lot of SEO driven strategies for blog content and other areas are fighting for the volume that you're never going to be able to break through. And so we tend to focus in again on like where we can be credible and have solving. So we do some SEO around that. The other thing that we're doing is we are again trying to spend as much time as possible with early prospects for this new product. There's a big aircraft manufacturer that we're working with and understanding. Okay, so it's a very different business from venture capital, as you can imagine, selling airplanes to people. It's a private aircraft manufacturer, so there's some of the same people who are involved, but it's a little bit of a different model. So we're just spending a lot of time with those people and analyzing the gong calls, or we use Wingman, excuse me, from Clary, and getting an understanding of like what's really happening and what's driving these customers, and then using that to drive our content. That was perfect example of we talked to a couple of what I would call them like strategic revenue operations or strategic operations people at these large, you know, 50,000 person companies about what they were facing with their Salesforce deployment this year, and then just tying that into what we're doing from a blog perspective. We're still doing some things that you could kind of consider as promotional, but we're trying again to learn from those prospects and those customers as quickly as we can. And that also helps when we find somebody like a really solid community like Salesforce Ben. The guy, his name is actually Ben, who runs the company. So Salesforce Ben, you get kind of a shortcut to that. So going where those communities are really helps us, and we do that on the VC side as well. We're like on part of VC platform. We have our own community, and using that to kind of drive that blog content strategy has been really useful for us. We haven't always got it right. You know, you got to be careful about which data points you take, but yeah, it's been really helpful.
I really love that because when you follow the trends and you read these articles and you have all this hearsay, then that's what's hot. That's the trend. But what the truth is, it's actually with your customers, what's
Correct.
working as a practitioner. And
Yeah.
so when you can follow the customers, the communities, and have a contrarian opinion to the noise, that's when you have
Yeah.
really insightful articles come out. Because if you're right about it, then everyone's going to see like, oh, these guys, they're the true authority figures. Because all that stuff, that's all noise. That's just an
Correct.
echo chamber.
Absolutely.
So the
Absolutely.
community, really great strategy.
Hmm.
Can we talk about how you use customers to get more customers? We talked a little bit
Yeah.
about this a little bit, and there's this element of FOMO involved. So we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. I think our audience has probably the of my career. This has the if you were saying it in a slightly derogatory way, it's FOMO. Like people in our audience really want to know what other people are doing in case they're missing out. Because if you think about why is that? Like if you miss out on investing in um, Facebook back in the day because you just didn't have an engagement with them, you didn't have you got rebuffed because you didn't have an introduction to the CEO or whatever that is. That's material. Like that's a material thing, and that's a kind of a silly example. But it's if you play that out over, deal flow of 100+ deals a year that are coming into investors' pipeline, that really matters. And so FOMO is a big deal in our industry. But what we found is that our customers are actually really excited about sharing what they're doing, not necessarily their secret sauce, like what's our specific investing profile, how do we screen in, screen out, but how do we build the infrastructure and how do we build our operational approach to be successful with deal flow and deal management. And so what we've done is we've spent a lot of time bringing customers and prospects together. Like every month we're running tech stack roundtables. Excuse me, where people are literally just talking about how they put together their tech stack to support their firm. We have so that's the kind of operational people. We then have roundtables around specific jobs to be done. We talked about the importance of jobs to be done. Like who's who's having some really interesting experiences in our customer base around raising funds right now. Again, they're not going to share their fund list that they're targeting. It's not at that level, but it's like here's how we're approaching it. Here's how we're doing it. And so bringing the prospects and customers together in that forum has been incredibly effective for us. And we'll do some like MC of it, and we'll curate some of the conversation. But we found that just letting that happen and letting that get engagement has been incredibly valuable. So it allows our customers and our prospects to join a community without joining a community, as it were. But then also doing things like, it's the classic, like take that and do a dinner in San Francisco. And we just had one up in the city where we had, 30, 40 people in a room, half of which were prospects, half of which were customers. And I know that the people who were there got value out of it because of the conversations that were taking place. But I also know what impact that's going to have on my pipeline. We talk about ABM and those things, but this is really about taking those specific accounts that are in the pipeline or early stage, or trying to work out whether they're interested in putting a new CRM in place or whatever it is, and getting those people together just has incredible return for us.
It's brilliant. It's very smart.
It's what's interesting about it is it's not like, thank you for saying it's brilliant. It's definitely a good strategy, but it's not innovative. It's what it goes back to telling that story and having those people tell the story on your behalf. That's what's exciting about it.
Can we talk a bit about how you harness these customers? Like, how do you manage all these relationships, bring them to this event? Do you incentivize them in some way? Do they get anything
Um,
out of it besides,
a really nice dinner.
besides a really nice dinner?
Really dinner. I have a philosophy that I never pay for references. And the reason I never pay for references, and I know it's a very crude way of putting it, but I don't want to buy somebody from something who's been kind of in some way paid through discount or whatever else. Personal. I see a lot of requests in my time here. I've had a lot of requests for like referral programs, and what they really mean is like I want to make sure that if I'm sending stuff to you, I'm getting paid in some way. So I never do that. Never, I think because I think it degrades the value of the references. But what we do is what we invested early in having a customer marketing function, which would build the relationships to allow us to bring those people together and identify who the right people were. We do, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 webinars, no, 2 or 3 webinars a quarter, plus these other events, maybe another 3 or 4. And every single one of those, almost always the customers that we have there are sourced by my customer marketing team to come. Like we have an incredible CS team. When we look at our win-loss data in closed, we can tell that our CS team is a huge reason why customers buy and stay with us. And so, but they don't have time to curate that kind of list. And so having a customer marketing person do that for us and maintain those relationships. We have a customer advisory board, same thing. It's like building up those relationships and doing it that way. So it's really just been about putting in the effort to have those relationships that would allow us to bring, hey, somebody wants to talk about fundraising right now. Let's bring them in and be part of a dinner that we're doing.
It's great. I love it. Paul, thank you so much for this. Learned a ton about how you created the content engine and the intricacies and details about how you executed. I think our audience is going to get a lot out of this episode. How can people find more about you?
I'm not on social media, but check me out on LinkedIn, Paul Ross at Affinity on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you so much. Really
All right,
appreciate the
thank you.
time.